What is the most admirable leadership trait? Is it patience? Is it kindness? Is it compassion? Is it being able to listen? Is it the ability to communicate? Is it sharing? You know, like we learned in kindergarten, whatever I have, it's yours too. Or what is, in your opinion, in your experience, in the relationships that you've had, what is the most admirable leadership trait? Welcome to Leading Leaders Podcast. 5-minute videos, 5 days a week. I find that a lot of leaders spend a great deal of their time trying to be liked by the people or the team that they lead. In fact, John Maxwell talks about it in a lot of his content. He says, you've got to be able to have that relationship with people that they will follow you, because if you don't have that, then you have no influence, which, well, basically, if leadership is influence, nothing more and nothing less, and nobody likes you enough to be influenced by you, well, then you're not really a leader. You're probably just taking a walk. At the same time, though, there's a double-edged sword that says, if I spend the majority of my time becoming the kind of person that everybody wants to hang out with, can I still be an effective leader? I remember in the military, we had this rule called anti-fraternization policy. And fraternization in the military had more to do with rank than anything else. So if you were an enlisted person and you had a friend, maybe from your local community or your local church, or you worked out at the gym together, and you later found out that you're in the same chain of command and your friend is an officer, your friendship had to be over. Because if they found out that as an enlisted person you were hanging out with somebody in the officer corps within your same chain of command, i.e. the same squadron or the same group of people, or you report to them in some indirect way, you would both be in trouble. Now the irony is we don't see as much of that from a policy standpoint in the world of corporate media or in the world of corporate relationships. We do see it when it's a dating or sexual type relationship. And we do see it still in those organizations like the military, like law enforcement, some medical fields, where a doctor and a nurse are not expected to have a relationship. It won't be tolerated within the organization. Even in law enforcement, if a relationship spawns, then those two people will be reassigned. They can't stay in the same organization. And part of that has to do with favoritism, with protectionism, with the ways that one person might guard another or look out for them or give them certain opportunities or special treatment that other people wouldn't get. And so anti-fraternization policies are designed to prevent that bias that comes because I like you, I know you, and you're different to me than the other people who are of the same rank or position. When you're a leader, again, at any level, there's always going to be the accusation of favoritism. There's always going to be people pointing at you saying, well, they treated so-and-so differently than they treat me because of XYZ. And chances are it's going to be made up. I mean, the reality is most leaders, like most parents, don't treat their kids exactly the same, don't treat their employees exactly the same. But it's not generally about favoritism. It's more about understanding the motivations and the way that someone thinks. I have 4 kids. I have 8 grandkids. And I know enough about human psychology to know that one phrase to any one of my kids would mean something different to any of the other 3. And that phrase put in its place, here's a perfect example. I've trained my young boys, since they were young boys, 8, 9, 10 years old, to be a gentleman. And I've laid out what those expectations mean. It means to treat other people with kindness. It means to be fair. It needs to be equitable. It also means that if you see someone who's about to go through a doorway, generally it's someone of the opposite sex, but most of the time they will apply it to anyone about to go through a doorway. If they're a couple of steps ahead of you, step around them and open the door for them. Stand out of the doorway and get out of the way and let them pass through. Be polite. Speak with people with manners. Yes, sir, and no, sir. Yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am. And don't cuss at people that you don't know. That's not even remotely polite. And that kind of frames for them, generally speaking, what a gentleman is. Now, when they act like idiots, like teenage boys tend to do, a lot of times my rebuke for them would be simple. It'd be one word. Gentlemen, it's a reminder that they're not behaving in the way that I would expect them to behave. It's also a reminder to them that there could be consequences for acting like you're acting right now, because that's not the way I taught you to act. At the same time, if I looked to my two daughters and said, gentlemen, that would be confusing for them, and that's not a reference point that makes any sense to them. They're a little older than the boys, and the way that I raised them was a little bit differently. I was still learning how to be a parent when my daughters were young. And so the ideas that I was able to translate to my boys are a little different than they were to the girls. That doesn't mean that I love them differently. It doesn't mean that I intentionally led them differently. It means that my skill set improved as time went on. I can tell you that in the workplace, leaders have the same challenge. Over time, they will grow to be better communicators, to be better leaders, to be more observant, to be more persistent. But also, some of that means they're going to be a little more standoffish with one person who doesn't need as much supervision, who doesn't need as much constant encouragement to keep the job done, who doesn't need somebody always telling them you've done an awesome job and patting their back. Now, there are people in my life, the 5 love languages, words of affirmation, that's my wife's thing. That's her love language. And I wasn't raised that way, and that takes a lot of work for me. So as a leader, as a husband, as the father of my family, I have an obligation to discover what those love languages are in my family, my team, my unit, and to use them, to encourage them, to empower them. So what is the most admirable trait of a leader? Well, I'm going to tell you what I've found in my own life and what I've observed in every workplace that I've worked in, from the military through every corporate America job and every individual coaching job, and even working on small teams as I do now freelancing. A couple of weeks ago, I was at an outdoor event with several thousand people, and I was leading a team of about 20, but for someone else. And so he would come around from time to time and say, let's do it like this and this and this and this and this. And I would take him aside and go, well, there's a reason that won't work, and here's what I've been thinking, and this is why we're doing it this way. And then there were times that he would just come in and try to change what system we'd already put in place, and it created some problems. So when he and I had a couple of hours on the road together alone, I reminded him, your personality style is go get it done, make it happen. And the pattern works really well for you because you're a type A driver from the beginning of the concept to the end of the project. But not everybody you lead works that way. And to deride them, to chastise them, to harass them about their inefficiencies because they didn't do it your way, that's not good leadership. So what is the most admirable trait of leadership? I'll tell you what I found it to be. Fairness. Fairness. It doesn't mean that everything is perfectly equal. And generally speaking, life is not fair. But fairness as a leader simply means to say, I'm going to treat you with the same level of respect, the same level of courtesy, the same level of honesty, the same level of appreciation that I would anybody else. Now, I realize your results may not be the same. You may not get the same outcome. And fairness may not mean that I spend as much time with person A as I do with person B because person A doesn't require as much time. But it will mean that I have the same level of respect, courtesy, appreciation for you that I do for anybody else. And it's not about your performance, and it's not about your revenue driven. That's a big challenge for a lot of leaders. It's not about what you bring to the table in your skills, gifts, and talents. It's about you as a human being. A leader who can look across the diversity of people, the cultures, their backgrounds, their belief systems, their skin color, their religious beliefs, and treat everyone fairly. That's an admirable leader. And that's a leader that takes some maturity and some development to achieve, because that doesn't come naturally to most of us. It does when we're kids. But as we grow up, we all get a little bit tainted by the certain experiences that we have with other people. And we have some expectations. And when they're not met, we get a little cranky about it. That's just human nature. But if you want to be a leader that other people admire, that other people say, I would love to work for that individual. Start with fairness. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.
Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom.